What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the 361 Degrees AG4 SOAR SE. Let's get into them. And a huge thanks, 361 Degrees, for sending me a pair of these over to check out. However, as always, this video is by no means sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are my own. Those of you who were around for my original AG4 video know how great of a shoe I thought that was in terms of protection, especially for people that are getting up and down off the ground over and over again. I really thought it was a perfect signature shoe for Aaron Gordon. Now the SE, especially the SOAR SE, I should say, the SOAR SE, kind of takes that design, it tries to make the shoe a little bit more malleable, right? A little bit more flexible and free of moving without kind of getting rid of its true roots as, you know, more of a mid-construction type shoe. So with that being said, let's get into the uppers. Now, the first thing I noticed about these is just how thin and breathable the tongue is. This thing is textile and TPU weave that goes all the way down the tongue. And then as you get into the uppers and actually wrapping almost all the way around the shoe, you have a very chunky textile and TPU weave. That combination that goes all the way around there is actually very, very strong, but also very, very porous. Even underneath of that layer underneath of there, that textile weave, also that netting, is pretty porous, even though it is also pretty, you know, it's substantial when you have it in hand. And I think the most in-your-face example of just how breathable this setup is obviously the breathability test. He's only heated up 94.9 degrees, and that is for a shoe with exposed thermoplastic foam on the drop-in. So, you know, typically drop-in midsole shoes, especially the ones that have thermoplastics on them, anything thermoplastic is going to heat up a lot more than something else. And these ones, and I actually went back and looked at the AG4, the original, and those heated up 94 degrees. So really on par with them. And even with that, you know, that drop-in midsole in there, still, you know, only 0.9 degrees more. I thought that was really, really a feat of engineering. You look at the breathability mapping of it, it kind of tells the same tale. Fog pouring out of the tongue, fog pouring out of the forefoot. Exactly how I was seeing it on the heat gun right when I had it pointed on there. Really just heat and moisture blowing out of these things like crazy. Now, the one thing that is really nice about these is because they retain a pretty similar construction in the heel counter and the ankle collar of the AG4, you really get no heel slippage in these. Very mild in the beginning, and then once this, you know, giant TPU piece here breaks in, really goes down to none. There's a ton of padding back there. You get a pretty substantial internal heel counter, but also that TPU combined with all that rubber going around there really does just kind of reinforce that heel counter, even though there isn't a true external heel counter on these. Now, if you look at this thing on the upper durability test, 10-second highest grit sandpaper, I kind of cheated a little bit because there is so much rubber that goes up over the top part of the shoe or over the medial side of the shoe we're going to drag, but the burr does not make it through the top layer of weaving. So still, even without the rubber, these things do pretty well. But for dragging or sliding, especially on an indoor court, these are going to be just fine. The one thing I will make mention of, though, in the uppers is that because the tongue is so thin and it does kind of have this little weaving break point here, you can get some lace irritation if you're a higher volume ankle or when you're first breaking the shoe in. So I'd say if you're a higher arched person, higher volume, or like I said, when the shoe is not broken in, like I said, you might have a little bit of lace irritation. It's simple enough to put a little piece of adhesive moleskin underneath of there to protect that, but just watch out for that because you are getting all that crazy breathability with even a really, you know, nice gusset on the tongue. You know, the laces are going to just contact you a little bit more, even though they are a little bit more flat laying lace eyelets. Like I said, you're just going to get a little bit more of that irritation that you might have to augment for certain foot types. But getting into the midsole teardown, this was a fun one, even for a drop-in midsole shoe. You have a 3/4 length nylon and carbon fiber shank. It's actually molded as it goes throughout the foot. It does extend from the heel all the way into the forefoot, which is really nice to see. It's sandwiched in between that thermoplastic drop-in midsole. Now that midsole does have a little bit of, you know, fabric on the top of it that may have been what aided in not heating up as much with the heat gun kind of hitting right at this. This fabric may have just repelled a little bit more heat. Also is a little bit easier to get on sometimes when you have a thermoplastic right underneath of your foot. It's kind of hard to get the shoe on sometimes unless you really open the laces up and slide in there. These ones, entry into the shoe was actually not bad whatsoever. So you look at this thing on the bounce height test though, got 42 centimeters in the rear foot, 42 in the forefoot. That's really, you know, what we're used to seeing with thermoplastics, especially from 361 degrees. These things are pretty bouncy. But the one thing that bounce height test does not take into consideration is the fact that this thing has two shanks, one integrated with the drop-in midsole, which will, you know, help with the bounce height test, but also then a TPU shank on the bottom of the actual, you know, shell of the drop-in, which honestly helps a lot especially in a shoe where you got a drop in where there's potential for instability. Any drop in midsole shoe is going to have a little bit more potential for instability than a traditional integrated midsole. And in this one, just because this drop in midsole has this dimple here, this male part that kind of integrates with the female part here of the drop in, and then it's also glued down in the back. So it is pretty integrated with the shoe, plus this giant TPU bar that goes all on the lateral side. I mean, it's you're locked into this shoe pretty good. But the fact that it also has the shank here to kind of reinforce just this thin rubber piece, because remember, on a lot of drop-in shoes, you'll see you take the midsole out and they're just floppy messes. Whereas in this one, you actually do get some structure to it, which really does make the shoe, like I said, a little bit more substantial than most other drop-ins. Now you are getting a little bit of increased weight because of that, even versus the AG4, the original. But what you get out of it is a shoe that, number one, moves around like a drop-in midsole, but also has all the trappings and protection of a traditional. And getting into the outsole tread, you've got like a razor, radial pattern coming out from the middle of the shoe, and that breaks apart into more of kind of like a herringbone, a dotted herringbone, almost looks like map points, right? This traction is actually pretty fantastic on indoor courts. On the grip test ramp, they don't slip till 45 degrees, which is honestly what we're getting used to seeing with 361 degree shoes. These shoes have a lot of grip to them. They do pick up some dust that needs wiped down. Look at them on the viewing box. Because the tread is so shallow, there isn't much individual rubber movement. This thing kind of, produces traction as a whole, and it is a full-length tread pattern, so that is nice. So I'd say as long as you give them a quick wipe down with your palm every so often, they should be just fine on indoor courts. I will say though, because the tread profile, like the AG4, these aren't the greatest things in the world for outdoor courts in terms of outsole tread. The rest of the shoe is phenomenal for outdoor courts. I kind of wish 361 degrees would make just like a super chunky, flat herringbone type model for this for outdoor courts, because the AG4 line is just such a phenomenal shoe in every aspect for outdoors, except for the outsole tread. That's just where, if you're not a huge dragger or a slider, it's not going to matter because the durometer of this comes in at a little over 18. Look at this thing on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, not even a millimeter of damage. So, the rubber is durable enough. It's just the profile of the rubber, and even with that heart of rubber, because it is so narrow and thin and shallow, really any gritty outdoor court is going to start to work through this. Everybody else, keep them on indoor courts, and the durability should be absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking of other things absolutely fantastic on these, you look at the speed ratio of the SOAR SE, comes in at a 2.39, a shank score of 0.4, because there are two shanks, brings it up to a 2.79. And yeah, I think that's where they belong after break-in. They are a little bit stiff to start because of the giant TPU bar, just, all the reinforcement, right, all the foxing. Because remember, you just got a lot of bulk concentrated around the rear foot of the shoe. So once that breaks in, they start moving. Yeah, they are pretty speedy shoes while also being very, very, honestly, bottom light feeling shoes, even though they are heavier, right? Just because all the, weight is concentrated, really axially with your leg. There's not a lot of weight, distal in the foot. It's all straight under your leg. So it actually doesn't feel all that heavy underfoot. I was actually pretty surprised at the weight of these things, especially versus the AG4. But getting into the fit of the AG4 SE, yeah, it's pretty similar to the AG4. These things have an 11 degree inflare, which isn't bad. They only come in at 9 centimeter metatarsal width, 10 centimeter toe box width, and a taper of 28 degrees, and they are a little hair long, just like the AG4. These ones come in at 29.1 centimeters. So overall, a long shoe, not a super wide shoe, which makes it difficult to fit for some people. I'd say if you're a narrow foot, especially if you're, not a super long footed or long toed narrow foot, you can go down a half size on these, I still think, and get a more glove-like fit. If you're a medium foot though, I honestly probably would be trying to break these in true to size. So if you're a really short, medium foot, it might be a mismatch. A 2E, I did break these in with some cramping. They do end up breaking in, but like I said, it was a little bit of a tougher break in. So I'd say you can go up a half size. If you can find, a half size in these, I think you can do that. Going up one size, if you're a long-toed person, I think then you're fine. Remember, drop-in midsoles, it's all about the usable space, right? So they have these rails on the top. So no matter what, unless they make the shoe really, really bulky, you're always going to lose some space versus the counterpart of it that doesn't have the drop-in, right? Unless they really change the last a lot. So like I said, to me, narrow and medium feet are best for this. A 2E definitely can get away with going true to size. Like I said, if you can break them in, because the inflare is not terrible. In terms of the snake bitten foot though, in terms of a drop in, yeah, these are pretty much good for really anything in terms of the drop-in space. Remember, you can't put an orthotic on top of a drop-in. I know someone's gonna make a comment about that in the comments. They're gonna ask me that didn't watch this part of the video, but you can't put an orthotic on top of a drop-in. These, like I said, because of the double shank, how long the shank is, the protection of that foam, I know I talked about this in the AG4 video, they're gonna be one of the more protective drop-in foam midsole shoes, especially because of how substantial the uppers are. The flange on them isn't super wide, but it is there, and it's pretty much all outsole based, plus you got the TPU bar here. So in terms of lateral stability, they're one of the better ones in terms of drop-in midsoles for lateral stability as well. So I would say if you're looking for a drop-in, looking for protection, yeah, these are one of the better ones out there. But in terms of the all-important performance, playability of the soars, I didn't notice a huge difference between the AG4 and the AG4 SOAR SE. Yeah, these were maybe a little bit more nimble, right? A little bit more malleable on foot. To me, I do like the AG4 best just because you get a little bit more weight reduction in them. Versus these for kind of the same midsole foam setup. These ones to me, yeah, they definitely feel a little bit speedier, right? They definitely feel a little bit, better kind of cornering, right? Basically, if you're more of a shifty guard type player looking for, the AG4, yeah, maybe this is a little bit more of a malleable, nimble shoe. You get a little more degrees of freedom once they're broken in. To me though, I really just loved the feeling of the AG4, especially because you can get an orthotic into the AG4 and then you just get the most protective shoe out there. I remember during the course of my basketball lessons, and every time I was out there thinking, the AG4, I really think I did not give enough credit to in a lot of my top 5 videos, because after taking lessons and seeing how protective that shoe really was and what that shoe was really giving to you and just how much that shoe insulated you, I really think that shoe should have been top 5 in all those videos, right? If I could have amended one shoe, it would have been to put the AG4 in. So I do think this is a nice complement to the AG4. And those people that want that drop-in feeling, I definitely think it has a place in the AG4 lineup. And I really hope they keep making them, because it is nice to be able to offer that, right? You want a drop-in feeling, yeah, get this shoe, right? It's similar enough to the AG4 to where you get a lot of the best aspects of the AG4, but with that drop-in profile. And if you from 361 Degrees are watching this video, it would be awesome to do an AG4 outdoor shoe, because like I said, with the rest of it, it is the perfect outdoor shoe. It really is. It's just maybe a little bit of a chunkier outsole tread, and I think you've got definitely, to me, at least in my opinion, would be outdoor shoe of the year, no question. So like I said, love your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you do want to see another 361 degree shoe that just came out, Nikola Jokic's new shoe, which is absolutely fascinating, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.